Okay, so in the middle of doing some work on the deck, I found that the spindle bearing, these ones are actually noisy. The bearings are like $4 a piece, so I ordered them. There's 2 required in each spindle. I ordered 4, so I'm just going to replace them all. This is actually a newer spindle, slightly newer, but change them all, and that way they're all good. So 3 tapping bolts here, cover comes off. I've already used my impact gun, taken the nuts off of here. The blades are already off on the bottom. I've already taken them off. Now we have to disassemble the spring-loaded mechanism to get the belt and everything off. So 15/16 socket, nut on the bottom, hold it with a wrench, zip that with the impact. It's still under spring tension, but you can get this off. You can wiggle it out of there, like so. It's a main tension spring. And we can flip this out of the way a little bit here. I'm going to just roll the belt off the deck spindles. Here we go. This bolt should come out now. This pulley block will come out. Perfect. And then we can get our spindles out. Pulleys come off. Nice and easy, actually. They are keyed. There's a key in there. Gotta make sure we don't lose that. Key has to come out so we can drive the shaft through. Yeah. This one's not bad. I'm still gonna change them. But bearings are definitely bad in this one. I might just take the entire spindle off. 3 bolts, carriage bolts. I might take them off so I can get everything on the bench. But we'll get back to that anyways. This belt's in good shape, decent shape. I'm not going to change it. Alright, we'll get things figured out, set up here. I'll get the camera back on. Alright, so we got the spindles out of the deck there. I got to change the bearings. And I got one done already because I wanted to struggle off camera. When I film it, I want it to make it look like I know what I'm doing. Fool everybody. Anyways, this one's yet to be disassembled. I'm not even sure which one's which anymore, left or right. This one is already apart. I've got the bearings out. So you can see there's a ridge in the middle there. That is actually another snap ring. It's accessible from the back side. This is the grass side. This is the deck side. This bearing can push right out. There's no retainer on it because when it's assembled, the spindle actually retains it. It can't go anywhere. So that's fine. We'll drive this one out first, and then I was having a real hard time getting the snap ring out of there. It's an extremely stiff snap ring, and there's no holes in it. It's just kind of an angled beveled edges. I'll show you a trick I use to get that out. I can't say I recommend it. It's what I did. It works in this situation. My regular snap ring pliers do not work on that snap ring, so I had to improvise. Okay, so let's get to it. We're going to drive the outside, the grass side bearing out first. Give a little bit of support there. What's inside there, actually I'll show you first, is there's your upper and lower bearings, and there's a spacer in between. There's no grease fitting on these spindles, but it makes sense because the bearing is sealed both sides. If the bearing was sealed on this side and open on the inside, then you can have a grease zerk there. These are 204RR bearings. They have a steel seals in them. They're steel shields. So I'm going to pack everything full of grease when I put it together. It's going to have new bearings in it, so it'll be fine. Let's get the backside bearing driven out first. The spacer is actually tight now. The bearings are pushing on it. So I'm going to just use a socket and a hammer. I'm going to push that outside bearing down. Now the spacer's loose. I can actually move it around in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset the spacer so I can get a punch on the spacer and start to drive that outer bearing out. So I'm going to, this punch is on the spacer, which is going to drive the other bearing out. Rather easily, actually. Now that it's down far enough, I don't want the spacer to turn sideways, so I'm just going to go through the spacer and get the, just catch the edge of the bearing with a punch. Easy as pie. Spacer's out. Bearing is out. Punch is out. Full of grease. Okay, so now we've got cavity full of old grease. Let's get that out of there. There's no water in it, so that's okay. I tried getting the inner snap ring out as well, thinking it may not be rusty at all. It may be a lot looser, but no luck there. So what I did was I grabbed a drill. I have a 1/8 punch somewhere right here. I have a 1/8 punch. So I went to my drill index and I got a drill bit that's one size bigger than 1/8. What I'm going to do is, you find the end, the opening here, where the snap ring ends meet, and I'm going to go in from the one edge about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to drill a hole on an angle that will actually basically drill into the back of the snap ring. So I'm going to get that started here. I'll get you a close-up when I get it drilled out. Come on, start. There we go. You're going to know when you hit the snap ring, the drill will stop drilling. It's hard, a lot harder than the cast, and it just stops drilling, so no more pressure. Let's get you a close-up of that. Get you out of the quick mount here. Okay, so there's the light bulb. There's the end of our snap ring. So drill a hole. Just touches it. So now I'll get the punch in there, and it'll push the snap ring away out of its seat. You see what I'm seeing? Yeah, let's get you zoomed in maybe a little bit on this one. You might actually be able to see the snap ring move. This camera's not too bad for a non-HD camera. Okay, so now I'll get the punch in there. You can see the end of the snap ring there. A little better, if it will, maybe. There, see the snap ring lift out? Now the punch is going to bottom out on the bearing race, but at this point we can actually get underneath the snap ring and start to work it out. There we go. Punch comes out. If you guys are dealing with snap rings, keep a finger on it. You should actually be wearing safety glasses, and so should I, but anyways, keep your hand on it, or put a rag on it, or do something, because they come out of here at a pretty good velocity. There's not a lot of, this one didn't spring wide, it's just a very stiff spring. So there's the snap ring out. Now we can flip it over and drive the bearing out from this side. I'm going to use the same thing, socket with an extension. I'm making sure that the socket, let's get you zoomed out now. Making sure that the socket is the same size as the inner race to push it out. When you drive a bearing in, you don't want to put stress on the internals, so you would want to find something that fits on the outside. And what I'm going to do to install my new bearings is I'm going to use an old bearing. It's the right size. I'll just put the old bearing on top and hit that with a hammer and get that seated in. Let's get that other bearing out. You can see I'm not hitting it very hard. It comes right out. So there's the bearings. Now we have an empty housing. I got a call from the tractor dealer this morning telling me my parts are in, so I'm going to go pick up my mower belt, my deck belt, and the bearings that I ordered. There was something I was going to mention about these bearings. Oh, the spindles. To get the spindle out, I started with a rubber mallet, hitting it hard here. I don't want to peen over the threads. And it was moving, but it was very slow. And I'm impatient. I have another project. I am stoked to get in the shop here. And I want to get this one done and out. So what I did was I took a 1/4 inch drill bit. I just drilled a little divot in the end of the spindle. Let's see if you're seeing. There you go. Just drilled a small little, just a divot. And I used an air hammer with a conical point on it. And I was able to just set it in there like so, and I drove it right through the deck. Not everybody has an air hammer, but I do, and it really came in handy on this project. I did some grinding, cutting earlier on getting the bolts out of these spindles. It was noisy and sparky, so it's probably just going to be a sped up little video showing you how I got those out because they were seized. I'll see if the tractor dealers got those when I get there. Out of all the nuts, 2 of them came off, and the rest didn't. So what I did was I took my cutoff wheel with the nut on that. I just went straight down into the nut and basically split the nut in half, and still didn't want to give up, so I turned it another 90 degrees, cut it again, so you can see the cut in that bolt now. I really don't know why they use carriage bolts in that application, because these squares are way too small to actually hold in those slots. Regular nuts and bolts will work, as long as the head isn't too proud, so it doesn't impact anything. But regular nuts and bolts will work if they don't have the carriage bolts, so I'll pick them up if they got them. So what we're left with after drilling that hole is that just a little spot right there, and it's basically just another snap ring groove. I'm just going to pack that with grease when I put it back together. Alright, I'm going to gather some stuff, go to the dealer, pick up my parts, and I'll restart the camera when I get back. So I go to the John Deere store to pick up the belt and the bearings I ordered, supposedly. When I get there, they had a belt there, and they had a carburetor float. Remember earlier in the video, the float was bad. I ended up stealing one out of another piece of equipment temporarily, but yeah, this is the float that I needed. So, anyway, I thought, oh, that's great. Now I need bearings. I gotta find them, so I got them to look them up for my STX38 yellow deck, which is the early model. It turns out they had 25 in stock, so we were golden. I said I don't need 25, I only need 4. There's a part number of the bearing that I'm going to use in these spindles. I'm not saying it fits every tractor. Always look up your application, but they had 25 of them, so I'm pretty sure they're a common bearing. So I left with my belt, my bearings, and a float, and about $100 lighter. So let's get these in there. I'm going to use, I wiped off an old bearing. I'm going to use that to get it in there. Grease on my hammer. I'm going to just start it gently. Keep it square, back and forth. If you hammer only on one side, you'll bind it in there. These came out pretty easy, so they'll go back in pretty easy. Note I'm only hammering on the outside ring. I'm not hammering on the inside race. Now we're to the point where it's going to get, my hammer's going to hit the housing, so same thing, back and forth. I want to get that stuck in there. I'm going to switch over to a brass drift. Make sure I'm hitting the edges. I'll get the snap ring in there. One of them. I'm going to make sure it's seated all the way. Not sure if I can clamp that or not. It's beveled on the bottom. See if we can get that rassled in there. Oh, yeah, snug. Okay. Let's try this. Use this to squish it a little. Maybe. Maybe. There's no super easy way to do this. You just gotta fight with it till it drops in. There, it's, nope. That's all there is. I don't have any tricks for that. Nope, that ain't gonna do it. Let's go back to this and see. Man, they're tight. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure I line up one end of this with a relatively similar position to where it was with that hole drilled in there. That way in the future, when this needs to be done again, you don't need to drill another hole. And it will, because it's useless if that hole is right on the gap of the end of the ring. That's that ain't gonna do anything. Oh, are we winning? I think so. There we go. Pretty close. Yep. That's it. Now we'll go to this side. Do not forget to put your spacer in. Get all the crud off of it. Just drop it in. It's a floating spacer. The shaft itself lines everything up when you put it together. Another new bearing. Like I said before, this bearing gets retained by the spindle, so get her started. Nice, dropping right in. Spacer's snugged up, but it's not tight, so that's alright. Sorry about that. There we go, and that's going to make sure that the outer bearing is pushed against the ring that we installed. Okay, so it's hung up on the spacer. Spacer's just a little crooked. I'm just going to relax that bearing just a little. There, spacer's free now. I'm not going to assemble it because these are actually pushed in with a pretty firm fit. Well, that should be able to go in there. Yeah, I just want the spacer to be just a little more floating than that. I'm just gently going to separate the bearings. We'll push this one out instead, it's easier. Just to make it easier to work with. There, that's nice and loose now. When everything gets tightened up, this edge here will bottom against the bearing and squish everything together, so it'll be perfect. I like these. They're rebuildable. Most of the time now, if you need a spindle for your deck, you just buy a new one. Comes complete, bearings and everything. Yes, it's easier to change. Any homeowner can change it. Not everybody can do what I'm doing today. But I like machines that are built to be repaired. The way everything was before. The older stuff is built with that in mind. Okay, so that's that one. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. You don't need to watch me do it. And then I'll get the hubs mounted back on the deck. The dealer didn't have any of those carriage bolts. I'm just going to put regular nuts and bolts in it. Probably replace them all so they're all consistent. And we'll go from there. I'll get the camera set back over on the deck when we get the hubs and everything all bolted on. Okay, so I got the hubs all mounted on the deck, and then I tried to put the spindles in and it wasn't working. I misspoke earlier when I said that the spindle would retain this bearing. It doesn't. The pulley, the base of the pulley actually retains that. The spindle goes in this way. What was happening was I could get it started, get it in there, but then as I was driving it, it would go through this bearing, then through the spacer, and it was driving this bearing back out of the housing. So what I got to do is I have to support that bearing, and by using the jaws of the vise like this, I can support on the outside edge. I need to support the outside edge of that bearing as I drive this in. I don't want to mushroom this out. This little piece here is what locates the blade, so let's get our driven through there. Slowly, I want to make sure that the bearing stays supported. This can be done on a press too. I have a press, not here. It's getting there. A heavier hammer would help, but that's what I got. Almost there. When it does bottom out, I'm going to feel it. There'll be a bounce in the hammer. Like that. The hammer bounced. It felt more solid when I hit it. That is now bottomed out. And it still spins. Nice and quiet. Now I can put them back in the deck. Alright kids, you got the motor deck back on. Not too hard on these. Actually, really not that bad at all. The front, a couple of arms go to the front axle, and the rear, a couple of little hooks that sit on rollers. Works pretty good. You need a 2x4 to block up the back of the deck to give you slack on those lift rollers in the back. But that, it works alright. So, I know I'm not going to sell this thing till the spring. Most of what I need to do is done. We've gone over the carburetor and all that stuff. The deck is good, blades are good, bearings are all mint now. So I'm not going to go too much further. I'll put the hood springs back on. And I'm going to park it outside. The next project awaits. There it is. There it is. I had the carb off of it, took it apart, cleaned it in the ultrasonic cleaner. It's ready to go back on amidst the other junk on my bench. It's getting ready to go back on. I'll mix up some gas. I know the bike's got spark, and we'll see how it goes. Anyways guys, thanks for joining me on this one. Thanks again for coming on the journey with me. Please comment or like the video, subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell icon to get notified when I make new videos. As far as this STX38 is, it's on hold for now. Alright guys, till the next video. Thanks, take care, bye.